I'm a pharmacist, I'm an herbalist and nutritionist. I've been a pharmacist for 45 years at this point. I owned a drugstore on the south side of town called the Medicine Store for 37 years, sold it 3 years ago to focus totally on natural. I've been a nutritionist for 21 years, and so that's what I'm doing here. Today we're going to talk about the digestive system. We just had a talk on the upper area, which was involved in things like heartburn, GERD, those types of things. So this is part 2, the lower area. So in terms of what happens in the upper area for digestion, you have, first of all, you're chewing your food, it's mixing with your saliva so you can begin to digest it. You then swallow it. At that point, your body takes over. You do an active work in the mouth, and then your body takes over. But the active part in the mouth is really important to get the food ready to be digested properly. That's you're breaking down the particle size. Once you swallow it, the muscles take over. It's called peristalsis. It moves things along in a manner that works its way down, so to speak. So then the food goes in the stomach. If there's a sphincter that holds the food down in, so you don't reflux back up into the esophagus. The stomach releases the acid to begin the breakdown process. The stomach actually churns and mixes like it's a muscular bag. Then the food, when it's done, leaves the stomach, and that's where we left off with the other talk. So now we're talking about the lower GI, the intestinal area in particular. So here we have today's talk, the lower GI. So once the food has left the stomach, it then enters into the intestines. And the intestines is really where all of the processing goes on. It's like the kitchen of the body to break the foods down so that they will be able to do that. So the food comes in the stomach, and then things begin to happen. The gallbladder releases bile, and that helps to cause fats to emulsify so they can be absorbed. The pancreas has multiple functions, but it releases a variety of enzymes that break down fats, carbs, and proteins. And then the bile itself, again, helps to emulsify the fat to allow it to be absorbed, and the enzymes are breaking down these things so that they can be utilized by the body as nutrients. The mess continues on down through the intestines, again, by what's called peristalsis, which again is just muscular contractions that move things on through. There's also in this area gut bacteria. These are what they call the healthy bacteria, the friendly flora, the probiotics, and they are a major player when it comes to healthy digestion in a good way. They actually digest your food. For instance, when you take milk and you add cultures to it, bacteria to it, it turns into yogurt. So what it's doing is it's digesting the lactose, which is the sugar in the milk that some people with lactose intolerance have problems with. But the good bacteria are part of that digestion. So sometimes people that have lactose intolerance, it's due to a deficiency of these good bacteria. Sometimes by replacing those, you're more likely not to have that problem. But the bacteria also is involved in the ecology of the gut, helps with the strength of the intestinal wall. It's actually a big part of your immune system. Anything that's going to get into you, any bacteria, whether it's outside or inside, and technically you could say from the mouth to the anus is outside because it's just a tube that goes through you. Anything that's going to get into you has to go through these good bacteria. So they create a barrier that protects your body from foreign invaders. Also in the intestines, nutrients and water are absorbed. One of the functions of the intestines is to take the liquid mass that started in the stomach, goes into the intestines for digestion, but then as it moves out of the body, it needs to be more in solid form. So it's actually withdrawing the water from that area. And that's one actually issue with constipation is if you're not getting adequate hydration daily, the body's drying it down more and more to save you, to keep you from hurting yourself with dehydration. So drinking fluids is really an important part of that, but the absorption is how this is going on here. Then the rest of the mass moves on down and eventually gets eliminated as stool. Okay, so what are some of the symptoms that are common with the the gut imbalances. That's kind of what we're talking about today. One is intestinal bloating, the feeling of, this would be below the rib cage, so to speak. You feel like you're just full. So bloating there, it could be even cramps and spasms. There could be intestinal pain, flatulence. Basically, flatulence can be mostly due to food that has not been fully digested further up is now being fermented further down. So if you get full digestion under control, then flatulence often becomes much less. And yes, there are certain foods that are prone to that, but in terms of general healthy digestion, that's one of the reasons for flatulence. And then constipation, hemorrhoids, and diverticulosis, diverticulitis, that's the outpouchings that can form in the intestine, often due to straining at the stool. So it creates like almost like a little balloon blowing up, and then it can catch material. If it's diverticulosis, it's not infected, it's just there. But if it catches something like seeds and things like that can get in there, then it becomes diverticulitis, which is an inflammation and usually an infection as well. And then IBS. Now IBS is I believe, a misused term. It means irritable bowel syndrome. And any time they use the word syndrome in a description of a health condition, it means they don't know what's going on, technically. So with IBS, if you have trouble, any of these symptoms, and you go to your doctor, and they say, okay, we checked you over, maybe we did a colonoscopy, we did all this scanning, we find nothing wrong with you, you got IBS. So it's really like a leftover description of a condition. They don't know why you have it. Now, you can have these symptoms with cancer, with inflammatory bowel disease, things like that. They rule all that out, and you're left with the diagnosis of IBS. So technically, I'm not wild about that diagnosis, but this is completely repairable naturally. Okay, so you get certain things going on as to why are these symptoms showing up. One is it could be improper stomach digestion. So again, the upper area, maybe you don't have enough stomach acid, you're not getting, maybe you didn't chew your food well, things like that. So you're not getting good digestion in the stomach area. Not enough enzymes down below, so this is in your intestines. You're not getting enough enzymes to break down the fats, the carbs, the proteins properly, and therefore you have insufficient completion of digestion, which then could create symptoms. Not enough bile, and that especially is involved if the gallbladder has been removed. Bile is a storage depot for bile. Sorry, gallbladder is storage. The bile is created by your liver. It then goes down a duct and goes into the gallbladder, which is like your urine bladder, and it's held there until you eat a fatty meal. Then your body senses that and causes a release, a gush of bile to come down and help the process of digestion down there. So the fatty foods, whether it's eating a steak or you're having fish oil capsules or something like that, any fatty food needs to be processed properly, and the bile is one of those issues. A good key that you're having trouble in that area is if your stool is not the normal brown color. This is often the culprit of why that's happening, and it could appear gray or light colored, green sometimes. So and sometimes foods will do that too, but in terms of digestion, improperly colored stool or stool that floats because it's got a high fat content is another possible symptom of poor digestion. And then an imbalance in your gut bacteria. Again, they're part of the digestive process. And then certain illnesses can also provoke these symptoms coming on. Celiac disease is a disease where gluten is affecting the lining of your intestines, and it can create a host of symptoms negatively. It also, that disease decreases your ability to absorb nutrients. By the way, it negatively affects your intestinal lining. Inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, the whole area is inflamed, and it just does not behave properly in terms of digestion and absorption. Gut dysmotility means that the muscles that normally move along, again, that's called peristalsis, are not doing that properly. And therefore things are kind of not moving the way they should. And again, an imbalance of gut bacteria could be considered an illness state because you're deficient in what you need to be there. Any kind of lifestyle, certain things that can provoke this food poisoning is obviously one, because now these bad bacteria are overwhelming your system. They're overwhelming your good bacteria, and they're creating their own, releasing their own toxins, creating symptoms like that. Stress, when we're under stress, our body doesn't digest well. Stress is what's called a flight or fight response, meaning you're on guard. You feel like you're being threatened. Well, your body has two sides of your nervous system. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is when you are moving, going, you're working, you're doing all these things, and you're managing stressful events. And your parasympathetic nervous system is when you relax, you digest, you sleep, you defecate. So all those systems are not as good, don't work as well. Sleep is another one. Don't work as well when you're under chronic stress. So that can then inhibit your ability to digest, because it's not important for you to have stomach acid when you're under stress, like you're running away from a bear. But even though you're not, you're sitting in your desk worrying or whatever, your body reacts the same way. And then older age, unfortunately, as we get older, we make less digestive juices. That's just part of aging. Sometimes it's also how you eat. If you eat too fast, if you're not giving your body time to process, usually you're not chewing thoroughly, you're gulping your food down. Again, reducing particle size is a really important part of healthy digestion. Not chewing your food properly, that's part of the same thing. And then eating too late in the day. You don't have time enough to process your food, and it's common to have heartburn at that time of night, and upset stomach, and that kind of thing as well. And then as well, the imbalance of the gut bacteria is a result of these lifestyle issues going on. Okay, so this is a little detailed, but basically what this is showing is this is a blood vessel, and this is 1 cell thick. This is your intestines. So your intestines are 1 cell thick. And that allows then food comes in. These are what are called villi that increase the surface area, the amount of area where you can absorb food particles. So it's dramatic how much area you have on a small body like we have. But this is part of it. And then the cells individually are actually linked together to protect things from coming in that shouldn't be coming in. They have to go through the cell or be processed by the cell. They call those tight junctions, and they just need to be tight. So this is a healthy, normal things. Again, they're absorbed, they come down, get in your bloodstream to nourish your body. When it comes to a defect, or what's called leaky, this would be an example where there's gaps between the cells, which allows things to get in, bacteria, viruses, even small food particles can leak in, and this is an inflammatory state. So, what are the consequences of this situation? Dysbiosis, which is really, the term is bad life. Probiotic means healthy life. And dysbiosis, so when you take probiotics, it's good for you. Dysbiosis is usually when the state of digestion and gut is out of balance. There's maybe an overgrowth of yeast, or there's not enough good bacteria, there's overgrowth of other bad bacteria. And that actually then causes damage to the intestinal wall. It ruins digestion, and then lactose intolerance is one example of lack of bacteria that allows the lactose to break down. So then you end up with what that's called malabsorption, or not getting the nutrients into your body like you should. You can get diarrhea. Your body's trying to get rid of these things. It's irritating to the intestines, and your body just wants it out of there, so it moves it along. Or you get constipation. We mentioned the dysmotility. Your muscles are not moving because they're irritated. You could be eating foods that are provoking constipation. So anyway, that's kind of the issue there. And then you can end up with something called leaky gut. Leaky gut is when you have things that are supposed to remain inside the intestines. And this whole area is supposed to qualify who's allowed to get in the bloodstream. And in this case, because this qualifying mechanism is defective, things can slide down in and get in. Now, the result of that, and it talks about autoimmune development, the result of that is, let's just say you have milk and then there's protein. Your body's breaking that down. It's in the intestines and it's being broken down. The body doesn't want that until it gets broken down. The proteins get broken down into amino acids, then you absorb them and it nourishes the body. If you absorb that milk protein before it's fully broken down, it gets into the bloodstream and the body looks at it and says, that's not food, that's an enemy, and I'm going to send an antibody against it. So now you have this antibody against, so it's an allergy, an antibody attacking this protein. So that's a milk allergy. However, if that randomly digested food particle looks like you, that antibody is now activated against your own body. That example with milk allergy is a common cause of childhood diabetes where the pancreas is being destroyed by your own antibodies, and a lot of it's related to a milk allergy. So this is the mechanism by which, and that can create a whole host of different health issues going on. Okay, next talk, we'll be talking about inflammatory bowel disease, which is kind of the next step with where we are, and more. We're going from less severe to more severe when you have the inflammatory bowel issues going on, and then there can also affect your mental health. They call your gut your second brain, and there are more. You've heard of serotonin. This is a neurotransmitter in the brain that is involved in mood, and drugs like Prozac try to concentrate serotonin to make mood better. And serotonin interacts with what are called receptors, like plugging a socket in a wall in order to turn on and do their function. There's more serotonin receptors in your gut than there are in your brain. So if your gut is out of balance, your brain is going to be deficient in serotonin. So that's just an example of the gut-mind interchange that goes on. And we'll do a future talk on that as well. Okay, so we want to now try to fix this. So how do we do that? Okay, so again, we're going to go from here to that. Okay, so first of all, some certain lifestyle things that we can do. Number one, I mentioned the flight or fight response. You want to relax. You want to take time to chew your food, have a conversation, take time to eat your meal. Don't rush through it. Give your body time to process. So you really need to eat slowly and relax. You want to chew thoroughly. You want to reduce the particle size before you swallow to assist the digestive process. Excuse me. Again, eating slowly, part of the relaxation, and then exercising is good for everything in your body, and in particular, it just helps things to move along, like constipation. If you exercise every muscle of your body when you're out walking around or doing aerobic exercise. Okay, in terms of dietary changes, one, you want to increase fiber-rich foods. So that's where eating the fruits and vegetables, and really, we don't eat enough in this country. For some people, their vegetables are the French fries and the ketchup on the French fries. You want to increase these fiber-rich foods. Part of the function of fiber, it stays in your gut and moves on out to become a stool. Plenty of water. I mentioned before about the issue of not being adequate. Water has two roles. One is helping you make the digestive juices in the first place. So maybe drinking a glass or two of water a half hour before you have your meal, get your body ready to make saliva and make digestive juices. And then you're not allowing your body to be dehydrated, so the stool won't get firm and hard when you want to eliminate it. Increasing probiotics in your eating, fermented foods, sauerkraut, anything with cultures in them, good bacteria like yogurt. Any of these things are very, very helpful for your gut overall. And then not eating too much. The more you eat, the more enzymes you need, more digestive juices you need. So moderating your food intake is really a good idea if you're having trouble with digestion. And then certain foods are definitely provocative. You can have a perfectly normal gut health, but for you may find, I eat a lot of broccoli and I get a lot of gas, that kind of thing. So you can play your lifestyle by the way you feel, but typically, the lactose products for people that have lactose intolerance are going to create an issue unless you take an enzyme along with it. But watching for things, some people, red meat causes gas, some people it's onions. So you really want to read your own body and And if you're having trouble, you might be able to find ways of avoiding that. And then something that's not well known is the damage that various additives to our food, various additives do to our food. The top three, carrageenan, polysorbate 1680, and the cellulose gum, are common emulsifiers. They give food texture, like they make ice cream creamy. They also extend the shelf life, so manufacturers like it because the product won't go out of date as quickly. But these are extremely irritating to your gut, especially people with inflammatory bowel conditions. Carrageenan, in fact, is used in laboratory mice to cause them to have ulcerative colitis. And then they work on them with drugs and everything else to see if they can resolve it. But why would we want to eat something like that in our own diet? What you want to do is read your food labels and look for those foods in that. Like, I think almost every brand of ice cream contains carrageenan. Now, it's just one of the things that may do nothing to you, but if you're having trouble, then you might want to look for that in there. Artificial sweeteners, saccharin, aspartame, sucralose, any of those chemical artificial sweeteners, they negatively affect your gut bacteria and a lot of other bad things, so those are not good to use. The next one down, the sugar alcohols, are not as bad, and what sugar alcohol is, they often call those diabetic sugars. They're they have a nice sweet flavor, but by nature of how this alcohol is created, you can't digest it, so it all stays in your gut. So there's no calories, but you can't digest it. For some people, if they eat too much, the sugar attracts water and you end up with diarrhea. So it could be, and those are some of the ones like mannitol, sorbitol, erythritol. Those are some of the ones. They end with OL, and those are the sugar alcohols. Okay, so how do we deal with this? Besides the lifestyle, next on the list would be to use as supplement a probiotic. These are, here's one example, orthobiotic and then enterogenic intensive. These are high-strength, professional-grade products that can really help repair your intestines, your gut flora, your internal garden, so to speak. So taking something like this, best time to dose these is at bedtime when your gut is at rest. The orthobiotic would be considered my normal favorite choice. If you're more inflammatory, like inflammatory bowel disease, I would go with the higher level of the enterogenic intensive, but just one a day. And for a lot of people, this can even normalize their digestive system. The life and death of these organisms can sometimes double the amount of stool that you make. So and by the way, healthy stool habit, I didn't go into that, is you want to have about 2 feet of stool per day. And if you're eating a fiber-rich diet, you're eating probiotics, you're drinking plenty of water, it will happen. It may not seem like it will, but it does. You want it to be normal brown color, and you want it to be formed but soft, it kind of coils in its blood. That would be, and no food at present, and you may see a little piece of corn kernel or pea kernel or something like that, but you shouldn't see lettuce or carrots or anything like that in there. That would be signs of poor digestion going on. So next on the list is fiber. Yes, having whole foods is very important for that, but you can also supplement with either flaxseed or psyllium seed, and these just help to bulk. Both of these are what are known as soluble fiber. That means like oatmeal, they gel up when they're in the presence of fluid. What that does to your stool is it, number one, that gelling up holds it together, so it actually prevents diarrhea, and it causes stool to form more quickly, holds water in the stool, so it prevents it from being a hard stool. So it's technically a stool normalizer, where you usually, if you have constipation, they give you a laxative, or if you have a diarrhea, they give you Imodium, and you're going to the extreme, and they can each cause the other symptom. You take too much laxative, and you now have diarrhea all the time instead of constipation. These would be stool normalizers, and they can just mix with your food as an eating thing. Sometimes there are certain symptoms that you want to get under control right away, like cramping and pain relief, and there's some things that can help with that. Mentholil is a peppermint supplement, peppermint oil, and it's put in a capsule, and the capsule is enteric coated, which means it will not dissolve in your stomach, It waits until it gets in your intestines, and then it dissolves, it opens up, and it relieves it relieves spasms on the lining in the intestinal wall, so it can help calm down cramps pretty quickly, and it's taken in between meals. Inflammable blocks is an anti-inflammatory mix of herbs, especially for gut health. And then CBD, a lot of information about CBD being available for a lot of different health conditions. It's generally a really good anti-inflammatory, and that's how it can help in these kinds of conditions as well. And then more to the point, in terms of if you're showing, again, the symptoms that I mentioned with the bloating, maybe seeing food in your stool, these types of things, OrthoDigest, all comprehensive digestive supplement that has all the digestive components that we make ourselves. It has stomach acid to start the process in your stomach, and then it has the digestive enzymes for digesting the fats, proteins, and carbs, and then it has bile. So it has all those components. Someone who doesn't have a gallbladder, this is a real nice product to have, because now when you're eating a food and you need more bile, you don't have that when you have no gallbladder. What happens with that is you have, I mentioned before, you have a storage depot, your gallbladder, to hold bile, and when you need it, it releases a bunch of it into your intestines. If you don't have a gallbladder anymore, you have a straight line that goes right to your intestines, and you're just dripping bile all day long. So for some people, they then don't have enough bile, an extra load, in order to process that fatty food. And again, signs of stool irregularity, like I discussed before. Or sometimes that extra bile causes diarrhea. It just is there all the time. And actually the fiber, psyllium in particular, is really good for that, for cleaning that up. Now, the difference between flaxseed and psyllium is that where they're both great fiber sources, psyllium technically is just a fiber source. The flaxseed actually has oil in it, which is very rich in omega-3. So you're actually getting a plant supplement of omega-3s. And the oil in the flaxseed, it's an oily seed, so a normal daily dose is like 3 tablespoons a day divided over 3 meals. There's actually a full tablespoon of oil in those 3 tablespoons of seed. And that acts like a lubricant and softener. So if someone's more prone to constipation, I would go with the flaxseed. If they're more prone to diarrhea, I would generally go with the psyllium. So anyway, the OrthoDigest enzyme you just take with each meal, and you adjust your dose over time based on what you need to process. You look for signs, and you're looking for signs immediately. You eat the meal. Do I get any symptoms before the next meal to tell you, are you on the right amount or not? So start with 1. If you still have symptoms, the next time you have a meal that size, have 2, and you play with it that way. And then another thing that can happen regarding the leaky gut, where I mentioned you're leaking foods into your bloodstream, you can then have allergies to that. There is a test to determine those. It's called the antibody that's created with a delayed allergy. It's called IgG, and this is a blood test. It's actually taking a blood test you can do to identify those. I have a sheet in your packet, probably the last sheet in there, and it gives a whole bunch of symptoms and these are symptoms of a delayed allergy response. And they vary from emotional to physical, all kinds of different things. But that's technically a result of leaky gut. It also then verifies you have leaky gut, because you couldn't have gotten those allergies unless you leaked food into your bloodstream. So that's just one thing to consider. And then if that's the case, there's actually a protocol to heal up the leak. That's the leaky gut protocol. Okay, so that's the end of the talk here. But just in terms of what I do work with people by private appointment to deal with any health issue from a natural perspective. So if it turns out you need more than if this helps you, great. If you need more help than that or on any other health condition, that's what I do. Work by private appointment. So there's information there. There's also a little brochure that's attached there. This is just one testimonial from a lady I just recently worked with. A 46-year-old woman with chronic fatigue and pain, headaches, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, and bloating. And she went from, and I do a symptomology questionnaire to rate their symptoms, so it's objective. And she went from very high to really very low in 4 months. And then her words are extremely pleased that I worked with her to help find out what's right for her. So that's kind of typical of the people that I see. So then we also then have the the inflammatory bowel disease, and my daughter Colleen, who's also a nutritionist, is going to be presenting that one. That one's going to be at 5 o'clock on July 14th. And then, thanks for coming in for today. There is 15% off anything in the